I want to do a couple of things today. And by the way, I kind of purposely hacked the title because I think the typical thing is the Startup Fundraising 101. The typical thing is, here are the 9 slides that you should have in your seed deck, and here's the order they should be in. And you can Google that, and within 0.2 seconds get like 900 million results. And I'm not deriding it, because I do think there's a lot of really good advice from a lot of people who have been there and done that. But I want to talk about something that's just a little different, and it is what I call raising predictable capital. But first, let me just show you what we're going to try to do today. And I know I don't have that much time, so I just want to share a little bit about who I am and who GrowthX is, just so you know where we're coming from. So as you digest, you can decide whether this feedback and the perspective I'm going to share today is useful. So who I am and who GrowthX is very quickly. The homepage of our website, unlike most venture capital funds, shows the portfolio company logos. We show the people and we tell their stories. And that's very important to us. It's one of our core values. So we are a seed stage fund. It's a $50 million seed stage fund. But we're more interested in market than product, and so we invest across industry and sector. Our initial check size is roughly $50,000 or $100,000. We do them frequently because we believe in the power law, and we know that just a few of the investments that we make, of the 300 that we'll make over the next 5 years, will return everything to our partners. And so what we focus on is trying to layer on intellectual capital behind our financial capital, and our focus is solving the sales problem. And so GrowthX Ventures is our fund. MXP is our market acceleration program. It's invite only to a few of the portfolio companies only. And it's the science of developing your market and finding product market fit in a very capital efficient way and building predictable revenue. And coming soon, launching this fall, GrowthX Academy. 15-week, full immersive, flipped classroom, project-based learning school to teach professional sales, marketing, and biz dev skills to complement all the product talent that we have in this town, but lacks how to go to market with it. And so we're going to be working with startups all the way to the Fortune 500. So look out for GrowthX Academy coming to a city near you. These are our beliefs. This guides everything that we do. Everything that we do. Products don't create value, customers do. And we don't think that founders should have to leave their home, their friends, and their families to build great companies. Why in the world people from around this country and world leave the comfortable home and the relatively low cost to move to the most expensive rat race in the country so they can be close to their capitalists? Doesn't make any sense to us. If you're going to move, go closer to your customers. And here are our values. This is perhaps the most important thing to us. You don't have to sacrifice these things, but if you don't first take the time to define them and write them down, well, who can be surprised when you don't accomplish them? So these are the core values of GrowthX, and I just couldn't be more proud that the team got together and came up with these and decided that this is how we want to act and this is what we want to create. Now, raising venture capital in the age of applied technology, this is important. We believe that we have slowly departed from the age of developed technology and are entering the age of applied technology. What does that mean? That means that products are cheaper and less complex to build than they ever have been. And so differentiation is no longer your product. It's now how you take it to market. That's the biggest risk. Product talent is plentiful. Market talent is rare. And so that's why we're focusing on it, both funding it, finding it, training it. And early stage capital has to find product market fit. Why is this relevant to a conversation about raising predictable capital? This is why. This is the day and age that we live in. And remember, when you sit down with me or another venture capitalist, Your competition is not the 8 logos on slide 7 on the 2x2 matrix with you up and to the right. When you're talking to me, your competition is every startup in the world who's also pitching me across every single industry and sector and business model. Because venture capital is nothing other than stack ranking. That's all it is. And you want to be stack ranked in the money. And so you need to be thinking about, before you sit down and talk with someone like me, whether there's a good fit. And we'll talk about how to do that, and that's how you raise predictable revenue. But this is important. You need to know this. Only less than 10 years ago, there was no such thing as a seed stage. And Series A got you all the way to scalable growth. Why? Because this was about funding product prototype. And now it's about funding product market fit. You have to go at least as far with your seed as you did with your Series A less than 10 years ago, and I promise you that the traction milestones are getting higher even during this conversation. So let's get into it. What's the number one mistake that founders make when raising venture capital? This is it. They mistake being busy for making progress. Right? It's very easy to feel very busy when you're raising money, especially now and especially in this town. You can get very busy because nobody wants to miss meeting the next Mark Zuckerberg. And when you have a $1 billion fund, like GGV just raised, $1.2 billion fund, 5x return, 6x return, 7x return, adds up to a whole bunch of who gives a shit. Because if you're going to return a $1 billion fund before you see a penny for yourself, it's got to be exponentially larger than that. Think about that before you take that meeting with a named Sand Hill Road investor. You're not raising your ego, you're raising money. And unless you've taken the time to determine whether there's a good fit or not, you're going to be very busy, but I promise you, you will not be making progress. Raise your hand if you've done this, the Silicon Valley Shuffle. Yeah, Marty, anybody else? I mean, hell, I know I have. Driving up and down the 101 and the 280, raising money. It feels good, right? But what you didn't stop to think is, who am I talking to at Greylock? Is there a good fit? Do they have the authority to deploy capital? Do they have experience in my industry or my sector or my business model? Is there money left in the fund? Have they spent it all? Are they prepared to spend more? Who am I up against? Do they invest at my stage? Am I talking to a partner? Am I talking to an associate? Right? This is how you find yourself super busy and not making progress. So how do you avoid making it? You take one of the most critical concepts to predictable revenue and you apply it to raising predictable capital. Right? Not all revenue is created equally. And if you want to cross the chasm and get to that huge bell curve of actual revenue or funding from later stage adopters who make decisions referentially, you've got to first capture that early market. And so here's the one opportunity that I have to quote Einstein and kind of compare what I'm doing to what he did, right? This is one of my favorite quotes in the world because it really does capture the idea of what I mean by don't just be busy, make progress. If he had an hour to solve the world's problems, he'd take 55 minutes just defining it and only 5 minutes solving it. And it worked perfectly when you're raising money. And it's true. It's not rocket science, right? You take the concept of market development, which is a formulaic, metric-driven approach to getting to the truth fastest, whatever that truth may be, and figuring out whether you can find product market fit and what that product market fit is, and then how to build predictable, scalable, profitable revenue from it. It's the same process as raising predictable capital. Be hypothesis-driven, be data-informed. So the first thing that you're going to want to do when you're raising capital is get your behaviors and get your tools in place. If you want to use a spreadsheet, great. If you want to use Salesforce IQ, great. If you want to use another tool, whatever it works for you, great. But put the systems in place, because the early capital that you raise, no different from the early revenue that you earn, is about learning. That's what it's about. It's not about the raise. It's not about the revenue or the profit. It's about learning. But unless you can capture that so that you can analyze it and iterate and respond to it, you're not going to do it predictably, and you'll be very busy, but you won't be making as much progress. Do not hesitate to ask any of these questions. I don't care who you're talking to. If you don't know whether they currently have money in the fund to deploy, you're busy, you're not making progress. They're not bad people. They just have a different agenda. So they very well might take the meeting or reach out to you because one of their associates found you and invite you into a meeting, and it has nothing to do with investing in you, and it never will. Doesn't make them a bad person, just means they have a different agenda. So, again, do you have authority? And what is the process for you to invest? Can you just decide on your own that you like me and invest? Or do you have to go through a process, and what is that process? Have you invested in things like me before? Do you have anything in your portfolio that conflicts? And how do you define that? Ask these questions, and I'll say this to you. Anybody who won't answer these questions, be polite and never talk to them again. I'm serious, absolutely serious. Anybody who would subjugate your priorities to theirs is not someone who you need in your community, because you would no more ask them to subjugate their priorities to you. Start with defining the profile of the person who hypothetically, most likely, based on judgment and reason, will be attracted and will lean in and say, I want to know more. And that's a great way to start. Now, really quickly, some of my tips and tricks. Just a few thoughts. You know, I don't think your seed or your A deck should be more than 7 to 10 slides, because I just don't think it needs to be. And by the way, having limited resources breeds optimal behaviors. So one of the things about just forcing yourself into 7 to 10 slides is it gets you to think more critically. And I've been a founder. I know the temptation when you have a Rain Man level of knowledge about the industry you're disrupting, and you just have to tell everybody, you're going to miss this, you don't get this. Resist the temptation to bash the investor over the head with every conceivable detail. It's important, you know it, it's wonderful. But forcing yourself to do it in 7 and 10 slides makes it a lot more concise. And again, your appendix is your crutch. You can have a 1,000-page appendix if you want. You're not going to send it out, you're not going to bring it up, but it's there to make you comfortable. So if that investor happens to say that one thing, you can say, oh yes, and go to slide 74 and show them that thing, right? That's the way to do it. Character-driven narratives, right? They work the best, right? And so, contrary to most of the advice you're going to get from people about your deck, I'm going to advocate that your first slide be you. Why? 2 reasons. One, because unless you're pitching a plant or an animal, humans want to connect with humans. At least the humans that I want to be around. If this person isn't interested in connecting with human or me as a human, then I know that I haven't found an ideal profile of an investor for me. And so starting with you and who you are enables that human connection to be made. But 2, if you start with the market and you start with the idea or the problem and the solution, and it's big, and it's got to be big, because if you can't capture my attention that this is going to be big, you've already stack ranked yourself out, because everything's high beta to begin with. If you don't start with who you are, then as you're enticing me with a massive market opportunity and this big real problem and these real people with money in their pockets that want to spend on solutions, I'm going to be thinking, well, who the heck is this person to think they're the ones that can actually do this? And you're going to wait till all the way to the end for me to go, oh my goodness, he worked at the company 20 years, so of course he... Don't do that. Start. So as throughout the conversation, that dissonance in my mind never shows up. And you've got me, and I've already believed you that you can pull this off. I think if you tell your story through the eyes of the people and the experiences of the people that are experiencing the problem that you're solving, it's a much more interesting, compelling conversation, right? So meet Steve, right? Steve is a this, and let me show you how Steve does his job now. And oh my goodness, it's frustrating. He hates his job, and look at the software he has to use. It's terrible. Whatever the case is, you know, and you can tell your entire story through the eyes of Steve. And when you get to your solution and you're demoing it, you can compare and contrast Mary, who's your customer, and Steve, who's not. And again, it can sound corny if you don't pull it off right, but it can also be a very compelling, character-driven narrative. Product team and market readiness, and play to your strengths. Investors are going to use different words. They're going to think a little bit differently, but I promise you, no matter who you're talking to, at the end of the day, what they're doing in their mind is stack ranking you based on product team and market readiness. Some of them will actually score you. Some of them will say, well, you've got to have, in your first conversation with me, across these three categories, at least 1A and no C minuses, otherwise I'm not going to talk to you again, right? Some of them will put red light, green light, yellow lights. But I promise you, no matter what they do or how they say it, this is really what they're filtering for when it comes to stack ranking. Pitch deck frameworks. So I know the temptation to jump on your Prezi and just find awesome graphics and put this cool looking deck together. Resist the temptation to do that. And if you already have a deck you're happy with now, set it aside. Email me, ask me more for my 10-slide pitch deck framework and storyboard. Here are the slides. Here's the objective of each of those slides. What do you want to accomplish with those slides textually? And then if you have the talent and interest to do design, great. Add a UI to it, because that's all your deck is. Otherwise, hire someone, because nowadays you can get someone very affordably anywhere in the world off of a platform or through a friend, and for $1,000 or less, you can get a great looking deck that has a designer that's taken your storyboard, and because you've done the storyboard, it's going to be a lot cheaper because you're going to turn it over to them, they're going to layer design onto your words, and hand you back a deck based on your look and feel, your template, or your color palette, or the things that you've talked about. But spend your time thinking about what your story is, not how your deck is going to look. Lastly, and I think we talked a little bit about this one, like, yeah, don't beat your investors over the head. And remember, what is the deck? What is that? That is your attraction framework. Free yourself. You're never going to raise money off of your deck. Nobody ever has or will. Your deck is simply to get to the right person and get them to lean in and say, I'm interested, I want to know more. And then you set it aside and you start a new conversation with them. And I really do advocate that you not pitch, you showcase. And it's not just semantics. What you're doing is amazing, and you believe in it, and you're dedicating your life to it. And whoever you're talking to should be grateful to have the opportunity to be hearing about it and to maybe invest in you. I've talked about this before, don't take meetings with associates, kind of ... I'm not trashing associates at VC funds. They're very smart people. They're very important. It's not about that. It's just about, practicing essentialism. And if you haven't read Greg McGowan's Essentialism, you need to. It's just about focusing on what your priorities are and not letting other people subjugate them, right? Because if you're not careful, you're going to wake up in the morning and you're going to spend your day working on somebody else's priorities. So establish what your priorities are and then focus on them. And the reality is, associates, with some exception, but very little, do not have the authority to invest. Any other questions? Anything I can be useful to? You've got my email, Andrew@GrowthX. Please use it. GrowthX_SF and @AGoldner are our Twitter handles. If you thought this was valuable, we appreciate you sharing it with the world. It's one of the ways we have inbound interest. But otherwise, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy day to spend some time with me this morning. I hope it was useful, and I look forward to the opportunity to meet each of you individually, hear what you're working on, and build a relationship together. Thank you.
Thanks.